Good day, everyone. It's JB coming to you from somewhere in the record sphere. We're taking a look at the different artists and bands in my record collection, and I'll provide some information, background, and thoughtful insights for each artist in alphabetical order. This is lucky episode number 13, and its focus today is solely on the artist whose full name was Prince Rogers Nelson, sometimes known as the artist formerly known as Prince, sometimes known as just a symbol. But most of us knew him as the man, the myth, the legend that was Prince. Now, I thought I would format this episode by providing some insight and background information on the artist's life, pair that with a chronological look at the Prince albums in my collection, and play some great music along the way. Now, I'm not here to detail every aspect of Prince's life from beginning to end, but to give some thoughtful insight and perspective of the life of a legend, a guy who I highly respect, and of whom I'm able to share the same hometown of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where he grew up and where I grew up, albeit in different timelines. I'll be reading excerpts from each of the books I'm about to mention to help showcase Prince's life from his younger years to his untimely death. Now, I should preface by saying I don't have all the studio albums Prince put out, but there's enough in my collection to show off plenty of his history and breadth of musical influence in these episodes. I've researched information from a multitude of sources, including but not limited to Prince, The Beautiful Ones, Mayte Garcia's The Most Beautiful, Mobeen Azar, Prince, Chapter and Verse, Andrea Swenson, Got to Be Something Here, The Rise of the Minneapolis Sound, Chris Reimenschneider, Minnesota's Main Room, First Avenue, MSPmag.com, and the Prince official website. All in all, I think we're going to have a lot of fun on this journey. So let's jump right in. Prince Rogers Nelson was born on June 7th, 1958, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to parents John L. Nelson and Maddie Shaw. Prince's parents found one another through music. In the 1950s, John Nelson had made a name for himself in the music scene, playing piano and leading the Prince Rogers Trio, a jazz group who would play in clubs and community centers on the north side of Minneapolis, like the Phyllis Wheatley House, a historic building that opened in 1924 to provide social services for black families moving to North Minneapolis. It was while he was playing with his group at the Blue Note Jazz Club that he first met Prince's mother, Maddie, and recruited her to sing in his band. From there, love and children grew. When their child was born, they gave him John's stage name, Prince Rogers. When Prince held his first ever piano and a microphone show at Paisley Park, he was processing his past. The show wove storytelling and reflection, and Prince sat down and shared his earliest musical memories. He sat at the piano, but recalled that as a child, he was jealous of his father because he could play piano and little Prince couldn't. As a matter of fact, he would get in trouble if he even touched it. Through the pain of his mother and father's divorce before he turned 10, it hit him hard. But the one thing he said he liked was that at least he could play the piano anytime he wanted. And play he did, learning piano here and there and becoming pretty good at it too, though his dad never missed an opportunity to remind him that he would never be as good as him. But still, he says they got along pretty well. They used to take turns playing Ray Charles's Unchain My Heart. Prince attended John Hay Elementary and Lincoln Junior High School, then later Bryant Junior High. It was while attending Lincoln and Bryant Junior High School that Prince met some of the people that would shape his future. We met the first day of school, remembers Andre Simone, a friend and future collaborator. I didn't know anybody then, literally. Mr. Lee, who was our gym teacher, gave you your schedule and said, "Stand against the wall." And I'll never forget it because I looked along the wall and there was 40, 50 people. And I just didn't know anybody. And I finally saw this one guy and I thought he looked interesting, like somebody I could probably hang out with. So I went and stood next to him. I said, "Hey man, how you doing? I'm Andre." He says he's Prince. I said, "Prince? Okay. What are you into?" He says, "I play music." I said, "That's interesting. I play music too." He said, "Oh." Prince and his newfound friends used to hang out at a neighborhood community center called The Way in North Minneapolis, a place for youth who needed a safe place to gather and hang out. The Way had a music program. Thousands of dollars went into purchasing not just instruments like pianos, drums, and guitars, but they also had a portable stage, amplifiers and speakers, a lighting rig, and a counter for serving soft drinks and coffee. The Way wasn't just a place for practice, but performance space as well. As the people who hung out at the community center explained, the opportunities they received at The Way opened the doors to the possibilities of what they could do in music, and it had a major impact on Prince and his friends. When not attending practice and performances at the community center, Prince and Andre Simone would meet up after school and jam at Prince's dad's apartment, where Prince would show off his favorite tunes on the piano and Simone felt out bass lines on an old 4-string acoustic guitar. Prince had a cousin, Charles Smith, who could play the drums, and Simone's sister, Linda, knew piano. Before long, their first band, Grand Central, was born. Grand Central was a band who covered all the popular hits of the day, mostly from rock and pop genres, and they were invited to travel around the city to perform at various events. In this audio clip, Andre Simone talks about the formation of Grand Central, and specifically, how Morris Day came into the band.
Okay. Well, what it broke down to is me, Prince, and his cousin Charles, my sister Linda, William Dowdy, and Terry Jackson, and then as we did a few gigs, and then we had a couple of issues with some of the band members, and so we had to make some changes, and I met Morris and got Morris had been trying to get into the band. He kept telling me that he was
Morris
a really
Day,
good drummer.
so we're speaking of, right?
Right, Morris Day.
Okay.
Yeah, he kept telling me he's a really good drummer, and he was so great. And I tried to explain to him we already got a drummer, even though we were having issues at the time. But I said we got a drummer. He's like, "Well, I'm better than your drummer." I was like, "Oh, are you?" He was like,
"Oh, really?
Yeah, you got to come hear me play." And he kept sweating me until finally, I wound up in because Morris is a grade ahead of me. I think he's either a year or 2 years ahead of me. So when I left Lincoln and went to the Old North, Morris was already going there, and he had full access to me then. And so he was just sweating me like, "Dude, you got to come hear me. Yeah, you got to come hear me play." And so he trapped me in the hallway and finally got me to come to his crib. And I heard him play. And after I heard him play, I was like, "Okay, you're in. I got to get you to come and meet the rest of the guys." So he brought his drums over to, at the time we were rehearsing at Terry Jackson's down his basement. And I had him bring his drums down there and had Prince come down and Linda and William.
Had Prince stayed at Lincoln Junior High, Grand Central might have remained a strictly North Minneapolis band. But soon after his fateful meeting with Andre and the formation of Grand Central, Prince was once again at the mercy of the city's busing program. Prince was bused to Bryant Junior High, where, as fate would have it, he met James Jimmy Jam Harris. It was this meeting of the minds that he would further expand his musical horizons, listening to the latest rock music from Carlos Santana, Grand Funk Railroad, and Chicago to keep up with his classmates' favorite pop music. Shortly after forming Grand Central, Pepe Willie hired Prince, and some other members of Grand Central to play in his band 94 East, so named after Interstate 94 in the Twin Cities. Pepe hired the members to play in 94 East after working with his old group Grand Central. According to local radio station 89.3 The Current, the cover band had caught Pepe's attention at a party, and he wanted to help the young musicians develop their craft. He didn't necessarily see any one particular band member that caught his attention until one day during a rehearsal when Prince stopped the music, unstrapped his guitar, and went to the keyboardist and said, "This is what I want you to play on the keys," and played the chords on the keyboard. As if that wasn't enough to impress Pepe, then Prince went to Andre Simone and said, "Let me hold your bass." He took Andre's bass and started thumping, and Pepe continued, "This kid plays guitar, keyboard, and bass?" I knew at that point we had a great band. Prince and the other members recorded some songs with Pepe, and it was stated that Prince's guitar playing made those songs. Prince and his friends continued to listen in on local bands, intermittently played with their band, and sat in on other bands when needing to fill space and close gaps. They also learned a whole lot about writing songs, performing, and the music business in general while doing this. A local band called The Family, with members Sonny Thompson, Pierre Lewis, Randy Barber, Calvin Cyprian, Bill Perry, and Ronald Willis Jr., made their way into the legendary Sound 80 studio to lay down some tracks, and asked Prince to fill in as a session player and backing vocals. He agreed and can be heard on the Family's song, "Got to Be Something Here." Sonny Thompson recalled working with Prince in the book Prince, Chapter and Verse, and he stated, "There's a difference between a great keys player, a great singer or whatever, and being an actual musician. That's how he was different. He knew what the whole sound should be." That recording session with the Family inspired him to head out to New York to search for record labels that may be interested in what he had to offer. After successfully recording some demos, he landed a listen with Owen Husney, who later turned out to be Prince's first manager. Heard here on a broadcast called The 5 Count, Owen Husney reflected on the first time he heard Prince's demo tape in 1976.
But the interesting thing is that when Chris Moon brought a tape down to my company, it was the demo tape that he had done with Prince on a little 8-track machine at his studio. Right off the bat, when he played the tape, I was all ready for my stock answer, and then I start listening to this demo, and it's obvious that whatever band was on the tape was trying to go for something new. And that's what struck me. Now, the recording, albeit was not, it was an 8-track. They did the best they could on a small machine. And the songs were too long and stretched out. But they were trying, whoever it was, I didn't know it was one person at the time. I thought it was a band. And whoever it was attempting to go for something new. I don't know if it was the combination of, keyboard parts kind of doing horn lines against guitar and whatever. But I could hear the influences, but it was not derivative. And I just turned and I said to Chris, "Who's the band? This is, okay, you got my attention. Who's the band?" And he said, "Well, it's not a band." And I said, "Oh, damn. Come on, is it a bunch of studio musicians? Because they don't tour, and it's, they don't want to leave home, and you really can't work with them." He said, "No." I said, "Well, then who is it?" He said, "Well, it's one person, and he just turned 18 years of age, and he's playing everything, all the instruments, and singing all the vocals." And the only thing I could think of to say at the time was, "Well, what's his name?" And Chris says, Prince Nelson. And I said, "Wait, you're telling me there's a one-man Stevie Wonder type of band, or one-man Stevie Wonder kind of person, and he's the prince of some country? Where does this fairy tale end?" And he was like, no, it's his real name. His name is Prince Nelson. He lives over North Minneapolis in Andre Simone's house. He lives in the basement. He left his home. And the first thing I could think of was I got to get this kid on the phone and talk to him, because it was very unusual. It wasn't obvious that there were like massive hit records in what I heard on the demo, but I knew there would be, because I could tell what they were attempting to do. And I think that Chris and Prince had actually written the first song on the demo that I heard, and that was a song called Soft and Wet, which then made it onto the first album, For You.
He was off and running. Prince's debut album, For You, appeared on the scene in 1978. Just as Owen Husney described in the audio clip, the album credits Prince with doing it all: produced, arranged, composed, and performed by Prince. When Prince entered the studio to record the tracks for the album, he would go down in history as being the youngest artist in Warner Brothers history to produce his own album and record every part of it himself. My collection begins a year after the debut, with the self-titled Prince album that came out in 1979. On this album, we can see a heightened sexiness, not just on the cover, but the writing as well, and the writing is more accomplished. The album also has the tight musical elements that he would come to be known for. It also starts to blend the lines between rock, R&B, and pop, something else that Prince would continue to do throughout his long career, and one of the many reasons I love the artist so much. That man could play any genre. The self-titled album began putting Prince's name on the musical map, so to speak, with hits like I Wanna Be Your Lover, Why You Wanna Treat Me So Bad, and I Feel For You. Now, on a personal note, actually, one of my favorite songs from the album wasn't one of the hit singles, but as previously mentioned, is one of the songs that jumps out of the urban funk, R&B, and disco and gets down and dirty with Bambi, a rock and roll force to be reckoned with. Another year later, 1980, and Prince's third album, Dirty Mind, hits the shelves. He continues to up the ante on the sexiness factor and intensifies his lyrics, ramping up the sexuality to the shock of his new fans, but they're loving it. Prince is coming out of his shell and there won't be any going back now. He's the rude boy of funk. One would think that he might have flown out to the Warner Brothers recording studios to record the Dirty Mind album, but that isn't necessarily so. As with his previous two releases, Dirty Mind was predominantly recorded by Prince alone in the studio. This time, at a home recording setup, at his house on the northern arm of Lake Minnetonka in Mound, Minnesota, approximately 20 miles west of Minneapolis. This album finally unleashed the pent-up energy that had been simmering at Prince's live shows, and it came just in time. Prince was on the final of the 3 albums that had been contracted by Warner Brothers, and both the label and the artist were eager for him to connect to the broader audience that they knew he deserved. Of the album, Prince once said, "If I could put my bloodstream on vinyl, this is what it would sound like." Prince had been starting to tour more, but in the early days of his tours, it was said that he lacked charisma. He had the musical chops, but not the stage presence a true musician needed. Well, a lucky break came when Rick James, a funk icon in his own right, invited Prince to open for him on his 1980 Fire It Up tour. In a Forbes magazine article from 2013, Rick James stated, and I quote, "I felt sorry for him," end quote. Now, all the musical knowledge, but he just didn't know how to engage the crowd. He and his team decided he would need to learn and improve. He took notes from the best in the business, including Rick James, as well as other performers. Now, by the end of the tour, Rick James said that he even felt overshadowed, as Prince was thrilling the crowds now with his call and response sequences, creative dance moves, and microphone hijinks. On the album, we can also start to see the formation of what would later be called the Revolution, though it would go through some changes later. Seen here on this picture from the album insert of Dirty Mind, we see Prince front and center with drummer Bobby Z, keyboardist Dr. Fink, Des Dickerson, Andre Simone, and Lisa Coleman. While the album is essentially performed by Prince, Dr. Fink plays synthesizer on Dirty Mind and Head, and Lisa Coleman contributes vocals on Head. Additionally, 3 tracks contained writing contributions by others, although only one is credited. Dr. Fink is credited as a co-writer for Dirty Mind because he contributed the main keyboard part. And although uncredited, Andre Simone created the bass line for the song Uptown. Initially, Warner Brothers was unsure about releasing an album with such vulgar lyrics from such songs as Head and Sister, but Prince won them over, and the album did come out in its entirety. Warner Brothers was partially right in saying that the album wouldn't get much airplay because of the strong sexualized lyrics, but the song When You Are Mine was a commercial success and a radio hit for the album, as well as the songs Dirty Mind and Uptown. As mentioned previously, those were the 3 albums Prince was contracted to do for Warner Brothers, but we all know he had far more in store for all of us. We'll talk about more albums and find out if there was any controversy behind the album Controversy, Prince's next album, when I come back with another Prince-themed episode. Stay tuned and come back to hear more on JB's Vinyl Record Collection. Subscribe and hit the notification button to be notified of uploaded broadcasts. Good night, and I'll see you next time, Prince fans.
You done me right.